What is going on, guys? Welcome back to Reacting to Crash Videos, Part 6. I'm really enjoying this series and I hope you guys are too. As always with this series, our goal is not to make fun of anyone. The goal is to take a look at some crash videos and kind of break them down and figure out what caused them in order to help people that might be new to the sport or might not be in the sport and they're looking to get into it. I think a lot of it comes down to decision making, and the more we can evaluate old crashes, the more we can improve our future decision making to avoid repeating mistakes. In this episode, we have 4 different crashes lined up. We're gonna start out with the most mellow ones, learn some very important lessons there, and then move up to the ones that are like, holy shit, how did that guy not die? So make sure you stick around to the end to see some of that. Before we get into it, I wanna let you guys know, on our store down below, tuckergott.com, we're running a 15% off sale right now. If you enter the code that I'm gonna put right here on the screen, you'll get 15% off of t-shirts and sweatshirts. All of that stuff is limited edition and we do not plan on restocking anything currently down there. So make sure you get your hands on it if you like any of the designs, like this Alpine Sunset t-shirt. It's one of my favorites. Also, we just added these sweet new key tags to the store. Risky Biscuits Co. on one side, Remove Before Flight on the other. Check them out, fresh restock down below. If you guys enjoy this channel or this video series, that is the best way to support the channel. If not, if t-shirts aren't your thing, I understand. Dropping a like is a great way to show some support too. All right, let's get into it. We're gonna play video number 1. This one I think is a really good lesson for all of us. This comes from Andy PPG. All the links will be in the description if you wanna check out the original video clips. So Andy takes off. He's pretty close to those trees and those cars, but hey, he pulled it off. He's having a good old time flying around, doing some paramotor things. He's got a nice flying sight. He stows his right brake. His tip steer is a little tangled there. So he undoes it, and right here, my internal instincts are going wild. That right brake was unstowed when he turned away. So now he turns back, his right brake is obviously stuck in his netting and he's trying to fix the problem. Things are going south very quickly. And he makes a pretty hard landing, but Andy is a real man. He's gonna walk it off. I think he's fine. Yep, thumbs up to his buddy. Everything is a-okay. So Andy, thank you very much for posting this video. I think this is an excellent learning opportunity. If you don't fly paramotors, little background information, the brake toggles that you use to steer around the sky, they have little magnets on them, one on the toggle and one on your riser. That's made so you can easily and conveniently stow your brake up onto the riser. Now, why would we want to do this? The main reason is so that brake toggle isn't flapping around and can't get sucked into the big spinny thing on the back. You might think to yourself, well, if it's dangling there, I've got at least 12 inches of clearance before it gets to the spinny thing on the back. But in reality, there's a couple things that could happen that would allow it to get sucked in. If your brake toggle's just dangling there unstowed, if you hit turbulence and you pitch forward, it could suck it into the prop. Also, if you're flying around and you hit some crazy turbulence, causes a collapse, that could introduce slack into your brake line, allowing it to go back into the propeller. Now, if it does contact the propeller, there's a few things that could happen. Best case scenario is it hits the prop and it just cuts it clean off. Now you're out a brake toggle, but you should still be able to make a safe landing using your rear risers. Now, worst possible scenario is if your brake toggle gets fully sucked into your propeller around the hub. Now, this would likely just wind that brake line all the way in, pulling the fabric of your glider all the way down back towards the propeller. Now, that's gonna essentially turn your wing into a streamer and you're almost gonna be in free fall at that point. And hopefully you have a reserve to throw out there into the wind and save the day. But that is absolute worst case scenario. It's happened and the results can be fatal. So that's why it's a pretty big deal to stow your brakes. It's a simple thing, but it's a very important thing. In this case, what happened to Andy was somewhere in between, which I've never seen happen before and I've never really thought about. What it seems like is his brake toggle went through the netting, maybe clipped his propeller and wrapped back around and got stuck in his netting. Now he was pretty low when this happened, and he didn't have much time to handle the situation. Now he might have killed his engine immediately out of instinct, which isn't a bad idea, in fear of getting that brake toggle sucked in. Luckily, in the end, everything worked out, so I would say he did an A+ job here. All right, so let's move on to video number 2. Now, this one, I don't necessarily agree with the pilot's analysis of what went wrong, but as always, I'm looking through a YouTube video. I wasn't there. I don't know the full situation, so I invite you guys to evaluate it yourselves and give your opinion in the comments down below. Now, this video is from Ollie Fair, and I'll read what he says first. Following a successful flight 10 minutes earlier, this was my second takeoff of the day from this field. All was going well until I hit a sink as I went down the slope. In my inexperience, I pulled and held the brakes to try and gain height, then tried to steer to avoid the oncoming tree, resulting in a stall. So here's Ollie. I assume his name is Ollie. He's got the Maverick Mobile. He's flying a Universal 1.1, it looks. Running. He's jabbing a decent amount of brake to get off the ground, still jabbing, and he milks it off. Now he's climbing out. Everything looks fine. Climb rate's kind of slow. And all of a sudden, wing kind of pitches back, goes parachutal, and he just sinks straight down. Now let's take a look at his GoPro helmet view. Pulling up that glider. He's running full power. At this point, he's kind of jabbing some brake to get it up off the ground, and he's off the ground here, climbing out, looking up at his wing, checking everything out, stows his right brake, still climbing, realizes he's not climbing fast, grabs his right brake again, and parachutal, kicking his legs straight into the trees. And luckily they were there to kind of break his fall a little bit. So here's my sort of analysis. Ollie, the pilot, basically says that he pulled too much brake and stalled the wing. My opinion, completely my opinion, based off of the footage, it looks like the amount of brake he was pulling should not have induced that parachutal stall. Generally, when you have a stall situation on takeoff, the pilot has to hold a lot of brake, arms like down low, you can see the trailing edge deflected, and hold it for an extended period of time. And then, and only then, will the wing fall back and stall. In this case, he experienced a parachutal stall, and judging by the outside footage, it doesn't look like his brakes are deflected that much, and judging by the GoPro footage, you can see just a second earlier his right brake was stowed. Now, what kind of things would cause a wing to go parachutal? There's a couple things. First off, if the glider was wet. It's possible to get your glider wet enough for it to change the characteristics just off of the dew on the grass, which is possible here, but furthermore, flying in rain can dramatically affect the glider's performance, and it can cause the wing to go parachutal. 2, if the glider was old, it could be very porous, or it could have line shrinkage or stretch, causing it to be out of trim. I don't think this is the case here because it looks like his gear is pretty brand new. 3, it's possible that the trims were just set in properly. Regardless of where the manufacturer recommends, allowing the trims to be out a little bit more changes the angle of attack, allows the glider to fly a little faster, and puts you farther away from that dangerous stall point. Now, it could be a combination of all these factors, some of them, none of them, I don't know, I wasn't there. But just looking at the footage, I really think that he should have been able to pull a lot more brake before that happened to the wing. All right, video number 3, this is from Paragliding Fails and Bloopers, and I just had to throw this one in for kind of shock value. There's not a whole lot we can learn here, but let's take a look. Yow! Bismillah. Holy shit. What was this pilot thinking? Judging by the footage, you can't really determine that anything was wrong. His wing was flying fine. It sounded like his motor was running fine. Just based off the footage, I would say that was 100% pilot error. And the main takeaway is don't be a freaking idiot. Like, flying that close to people, FAR 103 in the US is kind of written in a way that it's to protect the public, not so much us as pilots independently. We're not generally taking passengers, and they don't really care if we hurt ourselves. But they don't want us to hurt other people, and that's exactly why FAR 103 says we can't fly over people. In this situation, he was obviously flying way too close to those people and basically turned them into bowling pins. Not cool, not a good representation of the sport. You always want to make sure you're a clear distance away from people, taking off, landing, anywhere in between, that you're not endangering other people's lives like this. All right, so our fourth and final clip is the most dramatic. I don't know how this pilot walked away from it unscathed. You would have thought that he was dead when you see the footage. Now, this video was submitted anonymously. We've got a couple different camera angles to look at, but here's a little bit of the backstory. This pilot had been flying for about a year. He was relatively new, but he got really good instruction. He bought brand new gear, and he was picking it up pretty fast. Apparently he was very passionate about the sport. He had been flying very often, and he was kind of like one of those naturally gifted type individuals. Now comes the day of the crash. He's flying in a kind of unfamiliar environment, somewhere he hadn't flown before, and he's taking it low. Now that is an obvious kind of combination that increases your risk. Let's roll the clip and take a look. So this is from the outside perspective. This guy's buddy is flying above him. He's down low, kind of weaving through trees. And the pilot up top realizes what's going on from his perspective. He's yelling power lines and watches his buddy crash directly into them. Damn. There's a huge spark, and his buddy's flying around trying to get a perspective. And he hit the power lines, kind of bounced off and fell all the way to the ground. Luckily, the pilot stands up shortly after, and his buddy can tell that he's okay. Now let's take a look at the pilot's point of view GoPro footage. It's kind of grainy, but he's down low. He's flying kind of through the trees. He's flying into the sun also, which makes it harder to see things. And I think he realized last second, because you hear him gun the power. Jeez. So a couple things to point out. Obviously, flying low in an unfamiliar environment is not a good idea for power lines or any other obstructions that are out there that you may not know about. From his perspective, there was like one frame where you could see a telephone pole, but it was very hard to see because he's down kind of below the treetops. He couldn't even see that there was a road coming up until he was right on it. That's why it's always recommended, if you're in a new environment, fly high first. That gets you out of the zone of random obstructions, and it gives you a higher perspective to see things, and maybe fly over a couple times. Notice if it's clear of obstructions, then the second time around, come in lower and have some fun. Another thing to point out, they did have radio communication. However, for whatever reason, right when this was happening, the radios decided to fail. I assume that's what you hear the observing pilot up top saying, power lines, power lines. He's trying to tell his buddy that there's power lines coming up. That is a very smart thing though, because if the radios were working, he potentially could have saved his buddy if he had heard early enough to get out of the way. This pilot hit those power lines right across his chest. Now, he only had bruises on his arms and chest, and I don't know how he didn't get burns. Obviously, he's not grounded at the time, so the electricity's not really flowing through him. But those were the only injuries he sustained. Even falling from that height, he landed in apparently some soft grass and didn't injure himself any further. But this is a huge lesson to any paramotor pilot, new or old. Don't get complacent, don't fly down low in an unfamiliar environment. All right, so that's all I've got for this episode of Reacting to Crash Videos. Hope you guys enjoyed, hope you guys learned something. Like I mentioned in the intro, if you wanna pick up some sweet t-shirts like this, t-shirts and sweatshirts will be 15% off for a limited time. If you're seeing this video in the future, sorry, you probably missed it. So if you're watching it right now, current time, make sure you get on it before it's too late. Hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you in the next episode. Till then, peace.